Saving versus reserves. Are they the same? What's the difference? Cheers. Remember, boys and girls, you can't drink all day unless you start early. I'm doing this video to answer a question from a viewer who asked the specific question. Response in a previous video. Nice video, Dion. Thank you very much. I appreciate the comments. Even the people who hate my channel, who just put stuff like, when they find out I'm a landlord, parasite, or leech in the comments, thank you for the comment. It tells YouTube somebody likes my stuff and it shares it with more people. But nice video, Dion. Thank you for sharing your expertise and wisdom. Apparently, my ability to read is not the thing I'm sharing. Question, when putting up funds for repairs, maintenance, and vacancies, is there an amount saved I should stop at? Depending on the number of units, expected repairs, etc. Is there a number you stop at, or do you continue to put that 15% away regardless? So, savings versus the name of my own video. Reserves. Have I told you about my memory problems? So, I own rental properties. That's how I reached financial freedom. And my goal is to teach you how to do the same thing to reach financial freedom in 10 years or less, make work completely optional, even if you're not starting from the best position. When we do it with rental properties, one of the first things that people struggle with is what happens when something breaks? Water heater goes out. It's aged out. You need to replace a roof or a window gets broken. In the first 6 months to a year, this feels like it costs us money, right? Because it's pretty much money coming out of our pocket. So the new investor often makes the mistake of thinking that expenses impact your cash flow. If you're profiting $200 a month on a rental and you have a $1,000 expense, does that mean you lost 5 months worth of profit? No, because the saving referred to in this question is how much do we set aside every month out of gross rents to take care of future expenses. You can choose different amounts. I chose 15%, so 10% for repairs, maintenance, and 5% for vacancy. Even though I've never actually had a vacancy last more than a few days, I set aside that money because when you have a tenant turnover, there is an expense. When things break, there is an expense. When you maintain things, there is an expense. I chose 15% because I'm in a fairly high cost of living area where the rents are close to $2,000 a month or more, so 15% ends up being pretty significant. If you invest in a lower cost of living area like my friend Millennial Mike does, he invests in Gary, Indiana, I suggest, like he does, a higher percentage, 20 to 30%, because putting a roof on one of his buildings and putting a roof on one of my buildings isn't a very big cost difference. So the higher cost of living area would require a lower percentage of the gross rents to take care of maintenance and vacancy. So that's how much I chose, the 15% set aside on every rental that I purchase. I look at the rental by itself because I want to know that the cash flow, which is annual profit divided by cost to acquire, that's my cash on cash return, is enough to justify buying the property by itself. If you have one property that's making a lot of money, so you buy one that loses a little bit of money, people can justify that in their head that their overall portfolio is performing well. But I want each asset to be able to stand on its own in case I ever have to sell or lose an asset. So out of the gross rents, I'm setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. Well, how much do you have in reserves? Because reserves and savings are at different amounts. I actually agree with Dave Ramsey. The first thing people should do is make an emergency fund. So the emergency fund is not dependent on the size of your portfolio. It's dependent on how much you spend. I think the average person should have somewhere between 3 and 6 months saved in an emergency fund of what their personal expenses are. Reserves are based on the size of your portfolio. The question is there an amount that I save up to, or do you always save that 15%? The actual short answer is I always save that 15%. I want to know that that asset is performing well enough to own it and able to set aside 15% for future repairs and maintenance and vacancy, no matter how much money I have sitting in an account for those repairs and maintenance items, because they could be 25, 30 years from now. And I want the asset to still produce in the future expense cost what I'm needing, because gross rents grow over time, so that 15% would also grow over time. Here's how I handled reserves. When I first started, I had my emergency fund because that's my personal expenses. How much am I spending? But then I had my reserves for my portfolio. When I had 7 units or less, I believed in Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it's going to. So I had a $10,000 minimum in my reserves that I would maintain because I figured I could replace a roof, handle an eviction, replace a couple of water heaters or a garage door, and then be able to replenish the reserves out of the 15% of gross rents coming in. Once my portfolio grew bigger than 7 units, I believe in Murphy's fourth corollary, which is if a sequence of events can go wrong, they will, and in the worst possible order. So I increased my $10,000 reserves to $30,000. And I maintained it there, growing my portfolio all the way up to 16 units when I was working in W-2. I did retire in 2022. And when I did that and I lost that stability of the dream-killing narcotic that people call a paycheck, I increased my reserves from 30,000 to 50,000 because I want that swan account, sleep well at night. So the 15% from gross rents keeps the reserves full. I have my personal emergency fund. Now, while you can use those reserves for repairs and maintenance, those reserves are kind of like this MRE, military meal ready to eat. And remember that military grade always means built by the cheapest contractor. MREs are there. You can use them. You can live on them. But do you wanna? You don't want to always be using your reserves. My reserves are there and they are reserves. So the 15% of gross rents that would be filling the reserves when the reserve account is full doesn't come to me to increase my lifestyle. I don't want to have to diminish my lifestyle if I need to use those funds because of an expense from the portfolio. So that 15% it gets funneled into the investing fund. So basically, without touching the reserves and without changing the amount of my profit that I'm using to live my life on, my investing fund continues to grow. While that investing fund is growing, as expenses come in, the cash flow from your portfolio can take care of expenses as long as it is not impacting the cash flow that you're living on and it is not impacting your reserves. You can use your reserves for those repairs and maintenance and then funnel the 15% back in to fill it up. You get to choose which way works for you. Either way works. Even when the reserves are full and my cash flow covers my living expenses, that 15% that could be used for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy is going into the investing fund, meaning that the next investment will happen sooner. There is a difference between saving and reserves. Reserves is the minimum amount that you want to keep in your accounts to handle repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. The saving is how much you can set aside without impacting your cash flow. When you're working a W-2, this is how I looked at savings. A lot of people have a goal of having a 10 or a 20% saving rate based on their income, and they can actually run the math on if I make X dollars and I save 10 or 20%, it will take me this many years to retire. And that's not how I ever looked at it. I looked at saving as though my goal was to have a saving rate of 100%. If you can't save 100% of what you're making from your W-2, then you're not financially free and you can't retire early. As I was adding cash flowing units, rentals to my portfolio, it could be dividend stocks, could be growing a business that generates cash flow, whatever your asset class is. Mine was rentals. Once the rental income passed my living expenses, I started to live off the income from the rentals, save the excess income from the rentals, and then save 100% of the income from my W-2. So that 100% saving rate from my W-2 for the last 4 years before I retired gave me confidence to retire with the knowledge that I don't need the money from the W-2, and I had tested it for 4 years where I didn't need that. I hope this answers the question of how much should you save. Scales your emergency, scales off of how much you spend to live. The size of your reserves scales off the size of your portfolio. And yes, the 15 or 20 or 30 or whatever percent you choose based on the cost of living of the area you invest in is continued to be saved forever. Now, I do know people like the Lumberjack Landlord who run his numbers and he doesn't calculate for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy because of the size of his portfolio and the size of his cash flow. That is not what he did, and that is not what I did in the first 10 years when we were growing our portfolios. Those assets had to produce the money to take care of the things that are going to break in the future. The purpose of these live streams is for me to do what I did today. I want to do an intro that lasts somewhere around 10 to 15 minutes, and today we are at 10 minutes. It's like a record. Always been 15 minutes or more. So 10 minutes to answer this question. These 10 minutes are my attempt to get you to put questions into the comments so that this video can go on for the next couple of hours. And I answer your questions on real estate investing, financial freedom, and how to retire early. And what are the hardest things after you retire early? Things that I'm figuring out now. And so, I want to ask a question. And this question is for a very selfish reason. YouTube is a income generating business, right? They want more eyes on a video. So the more you watch a video, the more you hit the like button, which a couple people did before the video started today. I appreciate that greatly. And the more you comment, the more questions you ask, the more questions I answer, or the more you talk to each other during the live streams like this, the more the channel gets promoted. I am trying to get this information to more and more people because not everybody just hates landlords. There are some people out there who actually have a brain and want to make work optional and understand that investing to own assets, maintaining those assets, and providing housing for average people, for military members, for the Section 8 program, is something that our society needs. I'm trying to grow the channel to get that information to them, to you. So I'm going to ask a question that will hopefully prompt a few answers in the comments for the people who will play along. It's not related to real estate. I actually just want to see what the answers are here. And then I will have a follow-up to this question. So remember, this is unrelated to real estate. When we're investing in real estate, it's really hard to pick a partner, whether it's a financial partner, a marital partner, whatever it is. If your spouse is not on board with your investing, it can be very difficult. This last weekend, I spent some time talking with Jared, who was at the Christian and Cody Multifamily Strategies event at the Robin Hood Resort. And we actually sat for a couple hours together and talked. And I could tell Jared had the support of his spouse. And I think the investing strategy he was using would be very difficult if he didn't. Okay, so choosing your spouse is very important. Now, remember, this is not related to real estate. Answer this question in the comments. This is for the YouTube algorithm and for my twisted dad joke sense of humor, since Dividend Dave isn't here yet today. If you were going to pick a partner for marriage, I can't say the word, for marriage, what's more important to you? That they are good in bed or that they are good at cooking? Think about that for a few minutes. Put your answer in the comments. I am going to answer the questions related to real estate in the next couple of hours. Tonight, we have a members only meeting at 6 p.m. Pacific. So if you are a member, I will see you there. Those are the very boring videos where we look at deals. We do a deal deep dive to look into possible purchases that people are going to be making. I look forward to seeing you there. I see Jared did a super chat. Love the time you and Mike spent with us. Awesome. It was really cool to meet you. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. I like the way that you are looking at investing, and I think we had a pretty good conversation while we were there. So follow up to the question of, would you prefer a spouse that's good at one thing or the other? Was I unapproachable, Jared? Was Millennial Mike unapproachable? Because you and Curtis were at the table. Did we do something that made people not feel welcome? Because when we go to the One Rental at a Time event in Las Vegas, the thing that I want to make sure everyone knows, please come up and talk to us. That's the chance to come up and ask all of the weird questions related to real estate, financial freedom, making work optional, and those kind of things, or not. Okay, so howdy, Janitor on Fire, Bill O'Connell, REI Stoners, good to see you. Only 5 likes. Thumbnail alone deserves a like. Howdy, Simply Z. Is Dion Howie has changed my retirement plans that will always cause a thumbs up. Thank you. I appreciate that. I always hope that the information is helpful. That is the whole goal here. Frank, howdy. Hopefully you'd see you in the members tonight. Rich, Million, Booger Fart Boy, Josh, howdy. Where's everyone staying in Vegas? I still need to book something. There's a group in the chat who did an Airbnb, and some of us are doing an Airbnb. I think it's Beth Traverso, Millennial Mike, Justin Canberra, Lumberjack Landlord, booked hours together. So we're close-ish to the Center for the Blind where the event is happening. We're not on the Strip. You guys gonna rent a car or Uber? When I'm in Vegas, I tend to Uber just because I don't want to have to deal with parking. Oscar, Wayne, Jared, howdy. Let's get rowdy. RA Stoners, hey Josh and Jared. Yep, that's the booked an Airbnb. Duplex Dave. Howdy, retired person. I would love to find out about Airbnb, but Josh asked first. RA Stoners, why isn't Dave here, man? Why isn't Dave here, man? Hopefully you get the reference. Dave went to collect his dividends. I probably agree with that. Yeah, Jared, you and Dave are talking quite a bit about investing, I think, in Gary, Indiana, and I look forward to seeing what you guys do together. REI Stoner, since I only put 3.5% down on our duplex, should I make an extra payment a year to help gain equity? I keep hearing this can be a good thing. I've done it, and if you've watched my stuff, Josh, I don't regret, but I know it was a mistake. I paid off a mortgage early and it cost me $1 million. So a lot of people will do the bi-weekly mortgage payment. And the math breaks down where there's 12 months. So if you make 12 payments, that's how many the amortized payment schedule is based on. If you pay every 2 weeks, since there's 52 weeks, that's 26 sets of 2 weeks instead of 24, payments for the month. So it ends up being 2 extra payments of 2 half payments, so a full payment. And it can cut 3 to 4 years off the end of your mortgage. I would do 1,000-year mortgages if I could. Having equity doesn't matter to me. Having paid off properties doesn't matter to me. Actually, it's kind of a negative to me. I've got 2 paid off properties. I'm probably going to put mortgages on for a couple of reasons. 1, it's a form of asset protection. 2, I'm gaining appreciation on more than I have invested in the property. And 3, if there's ever a problem where insurance is involved, it's me and my lender versus the insurance agency. And it's the way the insurance agency deals with you if there's a paid off property versus how they know if they have to deal with lenders that are involved. So there's several reasons why I kind of want mortgages. I don't want to pay it off early. You can build your equity faster. Are you looking to do the Lumberjack Landlord, Millennial Mike, Zuber method of recycling capital with HELOCs and cash out refinances and selling for a 1031? Or are you looking to do my method where I don't touch equity? Because remember, equity is just our ability to add debt to an existing mortgage. And the mortgage that you currently have that you're trying to pay off soon, you've already paid the expense to have. You paid to buy down the rate. You paid the appraisal. You paid the closing costs. You paid the title and escrow fees. Do you want to get rid of it? You worked really hard to get that good debt. Let the tenants pay it off. That's how I look at it. So there is no right or wrong, right? It's how you feel. I feel like I don't want to pay one off early again. Dividend Dave, howdy. The Yoder, howdy. All-Nighter Ider made it. Awesome. Laura, howdy. Hope you're doing well. Jack, Stewart, how are you? Angel R, would you invest $8,000 to make an extra $9K a year? So what is that? It's over 100% return on your money. Often I would say yes, I would need all of the details on what's the level of risk, legality. But when I look at investing for a 10% cash on cash return as kind of like my target goal, right? If the market was tighter, I'm looking at the average and I want to beat it. So if I was finding 7 and 8s, I'd look for a 10. If I can only find 3 or 4s in my market, I'd look for a 5 or 6, right? So I'm just trying to beat the average with a deal that's better than average. If I invest for a 10% cash on cash return on a new property that I'm purchasing, I'm starting a new depreciation schedule. I'm gaining appreciation on at least 4 times what I invested because I use leverage. Tenants are going to pay off the debt. I get the tax benefits. All of that is there. So a 10% cash on cash return is great. If I'm going to do something like I have a property that was a duplex, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath each side, but each side had a den. And I could spend $5,000 to add a wall and turn it into a 3-bedroom because the den already had a closet in space. It just needed a wall with a door. I don't look at it the same. I wouldn't want to invest the $5,000 for a 10% cash on cash return, right? That 10% cash on cash return made sense when it was start a new depreciation schedule, gain appreciation on 4 times my investment, have tenants pay off the debt, like all of those benefits. So for a 20, 25, 30% cash on cash return, I will invest in a property to get that return. So if it was 110, 115%, whatever the math is on 9 versus 8,000, I would more than likely do it. But without the details, right? Without what's the level of likelihood of it happening, right? We can look at the last year of Bitcoin where it was probably the best performing asset class that there is. Can we look at the next year and say it will do that because it's been so volatile, right? It's crashed 9 times. It could be the best performing in the next year, but we don't know, right? Hindsight with most investment strategies is flawless and forward is foggy. So what's the level of risk? That would be the determiner for me. 57 Max. Howdy. I have a tenant complaining my crawl space sump pump is too loud. Requests me to put a timer for quiet time, 8 to 7. Am I obligated to let my crawl flood overnight to keep him happy? What can you do to mitigate the sound? Can you build a box over the sump? I've lived in a place in the past that had a sump pump. Don't think we heard it. There could be different insulation tricks that you can use. Is it too early for an overshare? No, because I've shared it before. I have a duplex where I went to look at a tenant who had some damage to a drywall that they were going to repair themselves. It was like tiny. And I go into his office and I see that the whole wall is like Millennial Mike's YouTube background is that sound barrier matting. Can you do the underneath of your place like that? His entire office was that way. And I kind of laughed. I said, that looks interesting. He says, yeah, it's because the neighbors have really loud Sunday morning wrestling matches. Not telling the guy that was my daughter's place on the other side of the duplex. But yeah, too early for an overshare. What can you do to mitigate the sound? And if it's a sump pump, can the motor be moved to a place underneath the crawl space that isn't a sleeping area? That's how I would look at that. A couple of ways to look at fixing it. Probably talk to a contractor to see what your options are. Instead of the timer, yeah. And I think I would try several things before I put in some kind of a timer. All-nighter hider. Hands are here for the next hour or so. I like it when people work when they're, because that's how I do most of my content, what do you call it? Intake. So while I'm doing something, I'm driving, I'm working out, and whatever the thing is, I haven't figured out aquatic earbuds yet for the paddle boards, but I think that would make that better. Duplex Dave, Q&A. I will be moving to one of my markets in Florida in 2 months. I will then self-manage 4 properties with Hemlane. What software do you use for inspection documents? So I use Hemlane on the not the whole portfolio, right? It's the properties that I've acquired since I went on Hemlane and the 2 tenant turnovers I've had since I've had Hemlane. So we have 4 or 5 properties now on Hemlane. Well, 4.5 that's going to be. But inspection documentation. Everything of mine is in my spreadsheet, right? Basically just in Excel, and my leather binder. When it was looked at, I've shared my leather binder, which is out of reach, I think, right now. And that's it. I don't use software. I haven't found a software that I would like. I haven't tried very many. I'm not sure, Duplex Dave, the size of your portfolio. I know you've been retired for a little bit now on it, so it must be significant, right? If you have 100+ units like Matt or Zuber does, I'm sure that there's a more detailed way to do it. And this is the thing that confuses. I'm going on a podcast here pretty soon, and when the focus of it is going to be the thing that confuses a lot of investors when I'm talking to them. I don't want bigger units, a bigger portfolio unit count. I don't want bragging rights. I want the right amount of cash flow from the least amount of units, easier to track. And so far, just a spreadsheet and my actual leather binder handwritten notes with some pictures in there it has worked well for me. Wait, there is a third thing, and I'm glad you asked that question because this is something I probably should have mentioned before. In my phone, I have an iPhone, I'm an Apple person, but it's a work one, either one. I have created a contact for each property. In the contact is mortgage number, insurance number, tenants, when's lease started, current amounts, um, major repairs done, or repairs or maintenance expected to come. There's two of when they're going to get a binder discussion in September and October at the end of this year. That's all in my phone in the contact. So I can literally go, okay, I own a property in Tumwater, Washington. So my contact, Tumwater, has all three of the units in there and all of the information that I need. That's how I handle that. So there is three things: spreadsheet, leather book, and my phone. I will also email myself pertinent information like the coded locks to a property. Send an email to myself with a picture of the coded lock page, which I thought I had one of those in here, but it has all the master code, the programmable codes handwritten on what I change the codes to for each tenant. And that way I have access to my email no matter where I'm at. Ninja Vanish, Josh, howdy. Financial firefighter, aloha. Dividend Dave, there's the dad joke I was waiting for. What games do Canadian frogs play? Croak. Okay. As everyone says with all of the dividend dad jokes, like the one you messaged Jared at the event to make sure he told me, which he did. And I've told that to a couple of people who didn't get it. How does that painter keep a house warm? Good job. Thank you for that. And thank you for the super chat. So I haven't gotten to the point yet where I can see the answers to the questions of, would you rather choose a spouse that is good in bed or good in cooking? Now before I get to those, because here's the whole point. I got the comments that helps the YouTube algorithm, but I want you to think of this. If you chose a spouse who's good in bed or good in cooking, remember, they got that way practicing with other people. Josh, Jared, get your flight booked. I waited, prices went up. Oh, yeah, get it booked sooner the better. Michelle, howdy. Any North Florida agent recommendations? Would love north of MCO and Jax. I don't think I know an agent in that area. I was down in Fort Myers. It's funny, spent 2 months there just before retiring in 2022 to study the market and scuba dive, right? But study the market, that's how it became a tax write-off. For friends who own a duplex, a house, and they're selling them all and moving to another state. So I don't know how that's going to go. Jack. And then Janet on fire. Random comment in support of the algorithm. Thank you very much. Of the channel. There you go. Close enough. Words are hard. Acronyms are challenging. Bryce, howdy. Do you upgrade your personal units much more beyond your rented unit? No. You ever seen I would never want to ride in a mechanic's car? I lived in my duplex for years, and it was bachelor pad. Like if there was no couch. There was a gaming table in the front room, right? It was tile floors, didn't upgrade anything. And I thought, okay, I'm going to move into my fourplex. So just before moving out, then I go through all new trim, new stove. What else did I do? I did something else. I'll put a fence in the backyard because it hadn't been divided because I didn't use the backyard much. So kind of the other tenant had the whole backyard, and all of a sudden they were reduced to divided fence for the duplex in the back. So I upgraded everything to move out. So no, I don't upgrade mine more. But that's because it's me. Add a significant other, and you already have a spouse who's compromising with house hacking to progress your guys' both your financial futures. If they're going to make the sacrifice to house hack, then yeah, what do they want? That starts to matter. Yeah. Love calves. Howdy. Jared. Wife is booking it tonight with air miles. Nice. BuzzTune. Howdy. Another couple people with their answers here. Julie, you couldn't choose one based on neither? Huh. I'm with you. But still, if you were going to choose, it does matter. Fire and can eat out. That is good answer. Manuel, howdy. Cooking are both good at cooking. I made Mexican food and she makes Hawaiian food. There you go. Matthew missed the intro. Sorry. It is there in Futureland, and I sound better as a chipmunk, I think. Jared, no, you were approachable to me at least. I think they were younger and just wanted to stay within their clique. There you go. There you go. But they didn't approach Mike either. Theodore, I've been swindled and got both. There you go. Angel art, and I will interpret as inferred. Eating is important. Bill O'Connell. A cook you can hire out and can be either female or male. The bed can't be a substitute and must be female must. Okay. This depends on the nature of your relationship. And then McAfee Kalafi took back a message to make me lose sleep forever and ever and wonder what was said. Dion, I'm currently doing deal analysis and I want to visit the town I want to invest in, which is about 2 to 3 hours drive from where I live. What should I do to be on the lookout for during my visit? I would call the non-emergency police number and ask if there is an officer who is willing to talk to you just for 5 to 10 minutes to answer some questions about the town. You're looking at investing or moving to the town, however your investing strategy works, and I'd like to ask some questions. More than likely, they might say no. But if you get an officer who's willing to talk to tell you the areas that you should avoid, that's a gold mine. Should be on the lookout during your visit. Face-to-face interviews with property managers for the same question. Which areas would you not manage in so I know where to avoid, just in case I acquire a bunch of rental properties here and use your services? Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, are there local REI investor groups that you can become involved in through social media so that you don't have to go there to be involved in them, but you can see what they post, what they comment, what they talk about, how their meetings go? That should give you a good start. Cops, property manager, local investors. The local investor is going to be your best source of information, but the property managers and police tend to know the good and bad neighborhoods. Laura, if you're in a growth phase, you may want to save that money for the next down payment instead. Yes. So if you're even in current phase, I like the money that's in excess of the reserves is going to the next investing thing. I'm trying to think of small expenses, a couple $100. I might just go through the cash flow instead of going into the reserves, because either way, it's the current money that's coming through the current month's cash flow or future month's cash flow to replenish the reserves. Kind of the same to me. Julie Anderson, are you pulling out the equity of the paid off house? Is that to me or to someone else? If it's to me, no. I actually like, I want to say like having equity, but what it is, I don't like touching equity. I don't want to recycle capital. I could probably increase my cash on cash return by taking out a HELOC or doing a cash out refinance and then buying another property. I might even increase the cash on cash return on the cash on equity return versus the cash on cash return. But I'd be adding units, right? During growth phase, you can use the Burr method to scale fast, right? Let's say you had that skill and you were in an uptrending price market with a downtrending interest rate, and it was the right time to do Burr, like the last 10 years, not so much now, and you did that, you can have a lot more units with a lot less cash flow, right? So no, I'm not touching the equity because I've constantly tried to redefine touching equity as adding debt to an existing asset. The paid off or the paid down asset that the tenants pay off, which is my goal going forward. Not something I want to do. I've actually thought, I haven't done it, of if you sell a property, take the gains and pay off a mortgage or two to increase the cash flow and reduce the number of properties that have to be maintained and tenants that have to be managed. Haven't done it. Don't know if I ever will, but it's more attractive to me than taking out a loan to add another property and reduce the cash flow on the first property. Jack. Thanks to Michael, Dion Lumberjack, and Millennial Mike, I've been checking that buy box every day. I found something that he laid back a swan, but someone that laid a black swan on me, and it's trying to sell half their portfolio for 20K under market value per building. Nice. You'll have to let us know how that goes. That's the whole thing. If you don't start doing the work, you don't recognize the great deals when they happen. Because remember what luck is. An opportunity meets preparation. I'll never had it. I see Bitcoin as a decades-long play for spending freedom, not a dollar denomination return. There you go. Angel R. I'm sorry, Dion. I meant to invest 80,000 cash to close, and after expenses, you make 9,000 a year. So now you're at a 11% cash on cash return. If it's $80,000 on an investment where you're using leverage and you're getting the new depreciation schedule, absolutely, that beats the 10%. But remember, that's just my market. What's average in your market, and does that 11%-ish beat it? Then, and math is step one, right? Because it's all of the details. Math is step one. Oh, wait, math makes sense. Okay, what's the parking like? Does the property have physical aspects that will help limit tenant turnover, like washer dryer hookups in each unit? Good parking, 2 bedrooms and a garage, side-by-side units, not over under, fenced yards because pet friendly means less likely to move. Like all of the things that come into play of, is this a good deal after the math would still be considered. I mean, it's like the people who say, well, I can't find the 1% rule, I can't invest. Write this down. Not one of my properties has met the 1% rule, period. This last one is really close. It was 400,000 purchase. I put probably 50 into it. So it's 450. So if I can get 4,500 a month, that'd be the 1% rule. If I rented both units out, they'd go for 2,200 each. So that's 4,400. So it's like right on the edge, right? But that's no mortgage. And it took a lot of work to do it. So like the ARV of 750,000 means I'm nowhere near the 1% rule of the value of the property versus the rents. None of my properties met the 1% rule, but there are markets you can go and invest and get the 1% rule all day. But would you want to? There are areas of Gary, Indiana, where Millennial Mike will not own a property, where his property manager won't go to. But those properties meet the 1% rule. Doesn't mean you'd want to own it. So start with math, then go through all of the other questions on, is this a investment worth pursuing? Math is step one. Jack, sump pump question. At work, we have super loud machine. We reduce the noise level by building boxes with sound reducing stuff inside the box, make the box removable so you still have access. Thank you, Jack, for summing up what I meant in like a sentence instead of the 4 butchered paragraphs I tried to do it with. That's a good idea. Build sound suppression around it. Angel R, in your 15% reserves, do you factor in the unit you reside in? Yes. So I'm living in this unit right now. The other unit is not being rented out. It's being rehabbed, right? As it's coming close to being done. So if it would rent out for 2,200, and this one would rent out for 2,200, I'm probably going to rent it. So if anybody is in the area and wanting to rent, I'm probably going to rent it for 2,000, because since I live in the other unit, the person who resides in the other unit is going to, there's a neighborhood cat that I've kind of let in and feed. They're going to take care of the cat. They are going to, if needed, take an Amazon package in for me if I'm coming back to the country soon. Like they're going to kind of have this help me with my thing for a discount on the rent. So I'm factoring what I'm setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy, and there's no mortgage on this property, but I'm also setting aside for property taxes and insurance. So yes, when I'm factoring where I live, that is set aside. Dapper D, howdy. Do your tenants watch your content on YouTube? They do. 2 of them reached out and had seen. So if you're interested in how the binder works, I have made a free course at diontalk.com. You can go there, you can book an hour with me. You can take the free binder course, which teaches you how to get your tenants to ask you to raise the rent. You can take my course. You can, and then the free binder course is a copy of my spreadsheet made by me and my CPA that tracks income and expenses from my portfolio. And in the binder strategy, there is my seller financing pitch letter. All of that's there for free on the binder course. But at this Cody and Christian multifamily strategies event this weekend, me and Millennial Mike did a quick live stream, and we actually did a landlord LARPing, live action role playing for landlords. binder strategy. He portrayed the tenant, I was the evil landlord, and two tenants have reached out and said, oh yeah, watch that. That's the conversation we had. That's exactly how it worked. Like if you came in and said, I'm raising the rent $100, I probably would have been really mad. But we had that conversation. You showed me what rents would be. You showed me what your best options are. And then you agreed to a $300 increase. That's awesome. I appreciate it very much. So yeah, there are some tenants who watch my content. I have to be transparent. If you've ever met a person with memory issues, you can't lie about anything. You can only remember the truth. And that's usually only when people remind you. So you just have to be transparent all the time. And it seems to work. Jack, Dion, how do you feel about the interview the other day with Zuber and the lady from Hemlane talking about locks? I have to watch it. I haven't yet. For Zuber's, I was waiting for people calling me during a live stream. Why would you do that? I was waiting for the Stephan video to come out, and I've watched a couple other things with Zuber, and I just did a couple videos with Dana from Hemlane. And we had done one before on talking about locks because they have this version on Hemlane where you can set up a one-time code through their locks for tenants to go and tour the property. So that might be what they were talking about, but I haven't seen it, so I don't know yet. I like it. I don't do the remote access locks. I don't want Wi-Fi access. I don't want the motor to engage or disengage the bolt. I want the motor to engage or disengage our ability to engage the bolt. Batteries last 2-3 years versus these Defiance that I got where a motor pushes the bolt back and forth. Door has to line up perfectly. It's frustrating. Not going to use them. Don't know if I should actually do a video on the Schlag coated locks that I have always enjoyed. I still do. So making sure that it's not a handyman or contractor or somebody. I'm happy with Schlag. I don't like Defiant. I'm not going to be using them anymore. And so I'll have to watch the one with Dana. I didn't catch it. Rich cooking then naps because you remember they have to practice with somebody else. Jacob. So you've mentioned a lot about trying to beat the area average. For me, the area average is about 1% or worse, and I've seen a couple 2 and 3% properties. Is that okay? I'm referring to cash on cash return. So there is a point where it gets so low where you're like, well, the savings in my bank right now is 5%, right? And I don't know if I've done the math on 1 or 2%. I've done the math on if I can get 5% on a property versus guaranteed 10% in a savings account. I'd still choose the 5% on a property. And let me know if you want me to break that down. But so if you've seen a couple 2 or 3s and you hunted, can you find the value add that gets you the 4 or 5? I would pursue it at 4 or 5. The 3 is really questionable because you're just so low on that. Yeah, that's a hard call. But does the property have all of the other things? Remember, cash on cash is important and it's step 1, but does it have all of the things that meets the limiting tenant turnover? Good neighborhood, lots of demand, all of the other aspects of investing. So I've watched All Night Hider lives in the San Diego area, right? There's a couple other people who live in the San Diego area where finding a 3% return deal was probably be a good deal. In that area, if I was going to invest locally, I would definitely still house hack, right? So if you are thinking of house hacking and your return is only going to be 2 or 3%, I'd still do it. Because the house hacking portion is to invest in an area, get the better owner-occupied lending, better interest rate, reduce or eliminate your housing expense, right? And it's repeatable. So while Millennial Mike prefers to invest at a distance, he is house hacking in a high cost of living area, and I'm trying to convince him to house hack a second time because he's been there for more than a couple of years, and it would make sense. So if it goes negative, yes, I wouldn't do it. If you're beating the area average and the area average is positive and the property met the other criteria, I'd probably still pursue it. If you can't find it, and a lot of people think, okay, I can't find a good enough deal to invest. I'm going to go out of state. Well, where are you located? Does it say it in your question here? You mentioned so it doesn't, but let me know where you're located, and I'll look at that. My brother invests some in Washington State and some in California. And in California, a lot of people say, I can't invest in California. It's too expensive. So I'm going to go to Gary, Indiana. Well, what did Zuber from One Rental at a Time do? He lived in Sacramento, too high cost of living area, couldn't find good deals, tried for 6 months to a year, spent too much time in a spreadsheet. Then he went out to Fresno. right? 2.5, 3 hours away. My brother went to Kern County, so north of Los Angeles, and he owns out in the Rosemont area, right? So it's the desert in the middle of nowhere, but can find the cash flowing deals. How far would you have to go to find the deals that make sense? I expanded my market out about another 30 minutes so that I could. So Jacob, you're going to be in the Spokane area. That's where you're looking. Spokane, Tri-Cities. How far can you go out to find those deals? And here's what shifted. When you look on the market, all of my deals are from the MLS. No special sauce, no mailers, no driving for dollars, no calling the owners of rentals. None of these creative ways. I'm way too lazy for that. I just set up auto searches on the MLS. And for the last decade, up to 2 years ago, speed was the most important thing. The faster I can get the offer in, but like within an hour of it hitting the MLS, maybe two if it was a weekend, with a letter of pre-approval, my offer, trying to get an offer accepted before the seller knew that they were going to get a bunch of offers, or I acquired half my portfolio because I made my offer. They took another offer that was better. And then I sent a follow-up saying, hey, I understand you got a better offer. My offer still stands in case that falls through. So that the people who made a really quick, really high offer or waived contingencies or whatever did it so they can get the seller locked down and then negotiate hard. My offer was sitting there so the seller didn't have to do that. And then they came back and said, we take your offer. Half of my portfolio was through that strategy. Well, what shifted in the last 2 years and how I got my most recent deal in 2023, I purchased a duplex by looking for days on market. So I'd go to your Spokane area and I would set up your searches for properties that have been listed at least 30, 60, or 90 days. I went for 91 days thinking at 90 days, you have to repost the listing. So if they've reposted, they might be a motivated seller. They might actually be interested in selling, but they're not getting the price that they want. So maybe this is when I can make my, and I did, 80% offer, where now it made sense. So can you expand your market, change what you're looking at for days on market, and hunt for those value add things and include house hacking? Duplex Dave. My wife is not good at either and doesn't support my real estate journey. So I guess I win the trifecta. The struggle is very real for me, but I'm still making good progress. I will be the first to say this is not where anybody should go for relationship advice. Laura to Michelle, I'm in East Coast Florida. There are a lot of YouTubers that advertise and talk about the good and the bad. There you go. Cool. Dave, my Gary property meets the 1% rule because it's in Gary, right? Julie, in my opinion, I think you should pull equity out and buy a place in Arizona or Tennessee. I have a good friend who's moving to Tennessee. I went and looked at a property, and so I think he's made a couple offers on it, and I would totally buy to be able to go and spend time with them. They're a great couple. And maybe, but I don't want more properties. Julie, this is the struggle of reaching financial freedom by having that mentality of the right amount of cash flow from the least amount of units. The goal is financial freedom for me. It's not the bigger portfolio. Now, it definitely wasn't, I want $4,000 a month in cash flow, so I hit $4,000 a month and then retire, right? That's not the deal. I live on $4,000 a month because I house hack, drive paid off vehicles. And I don't have expensive habits other than scuba diving, which is probably the most expensive thing that I spend my money on. I wanted 16,000, wanted 4 times my cost of living coming in from a source where I don't have to sell my life 1 hour at a time to get it. So when it passed 16, I retired. I didn't want 50,000 a month or 30,000 a month, right? This sounds stupid to say. I'm struggling to figure out how to spend the 16,000 a month. Now it's very easy when it's like, okay, how can I protect my assets? Well, it doesn't really need a roof, but it will in a couple of years. I might as well just pull the trigger on that. That one probably going to need a septic in the next couple. I'm just going to put a whole new septic system. Like I'm putting my money to work to protect my assets because in my 50s, this means it might be the last time I ever have to think about that part of this property again. And then it's going to be Millennial Mike's problem when he seller finances all this from me when he turns 50. But the way the rules and regulations are in Washington State, I was invited by a representative to come and testify in Olympia on these, and I should probably go do that. I'm torn. Let me know. All right. Question for you guys. Not like the cooking or the sex thing. An actual question related to this. I'm going to ask you to be my conscience. Should I be a horrible, evil person or should I be a decent person? Washington State is proposing a rent control law. It's a bill, so it's a proposed law, right? And that's how a bill becomes a law. So it would cap rent increases at 5% every year. And it does a few other limiting, like how much deposits could be. And I mean, it's bill something. I made a Facebook post about it today, which you can go to the link and you can talk to your legislator if you live in Washington State and give your opinion. You can be pro, you can be against. I don't care. That's how the system works. So here's my torn divergence of personalities. I'm a human. I like to make money. Rent control makes owners richer and tenants homeless. So if I will generally do a 5% increase every other year, and in the case of two of my tenants that I was going through the look, it's like 4 years since they had a rent increase. I just don't care. If it makes them enough money, I'll do a 5% every now and then after I've done the binder strategy because I got the rents where I wanted them. Then I'll do a small increase to stay. But when we have a pandemic and we have an eviction moratorium and a rent freeze, and the next year I do the binder strategy and see a 20 to 28% increase. And then this year, just the threat of rent control, I went around and did the binder strategy with every single tenant again and saw a significant increase in my income, which, it's terrible. I'm going to make more money because they threatened rent control. So instead of 5% every other year, and sometimes even longer than that, rent control will tie my hands. Since I can't do a significant increase if there's a significant increase to costs, I have to do the maximum every year of 5%, which is even more strict in California. California's restriction is 5% plus inflation up to 10%. And it doesn't impact single family houses in your own name, doesn't impact duplexes in your own name. And right, so Washington is proposing a more strict rent control policy than California has. What's happening to rents in California? So the horrible, evil person in me is like, well, just sit back. If people vote this stupid thing in and make me richer and more people homeless, because how it makes people homeless is landlords, write this down, might not be stupid. Not all of them anyway. And if you have a tenant that's too far and below in rent, you just serve them a 90-day notice that you're going to rehab the unit or that you're going to move in. And now they move out and they can't find a place to afford because the rents have gone up so much because of rent control that every time there's a tenant turnover, rents are jacked up as much as they can go because of the added risk to the landlord. So the horrible, evil person is like, yeah, I should just sit back. But the compassionate person in me wants to go and testify in Olympia and say, hey, here's how rent control works. Here's my leases with my tenants where they went 2 or 3 years without a rent increase, and then they got a 5% increase. Versus if I can't do a larger increase when there's a bigger expense, and I now have to do 5% every year. So thank you. You will double or triple the amount of money, and it's the amount of money I will make. Because a 5% increase, if you have run this down, I should whiteboard this. If you have a $2,000 rental and you're making $400, and so it's $400 in profit. You got the mortgage, you got your repairs and maintenance and vacancy going to the side, taxes, insurance, all that kind of stuff. $400 is left, whatever the math is for you. Mine's way better than that, but let's say it was 400. And you do a 5% increase. That's a $100 increase, right? It's 25% more profit for me. Now, you double that instead of every other year, and I'm going to do it every year. I can go and testify and say, you're going to make me rich and you're going to make tenants homeless. And you're going to further restrict building because investors might not want to invest where there's rent control restrictions. So there's less motivation for builders because they have less competition wanting to buy their properties. So building will even be more reduced than it is. Like this cascading trail effect that we can see produced over and over and over in every place that tried to buy votes by creating rent control. Let me know. Should I be the horrible, evil person that just gets richer? Or should I go and talk about how bad rent control is for the tenants? I think I already know what I'm good at. I'm pretty good at working in the politics thing. I've testified to the higher ed committee, the transportation committee, been involved in several Lean Six Sigma meetings on how to improve processes for those kind of things. But this one, I don't know. There we go. Michelle Meyer. I'm in the East Coast. There you go. Tim and Dave. Julie understand. Ariana, howdy. Can you talk about the fear of entry? Sometimes a good deal is in an area with several properties posted for rent Why enter the market at this point? Is there such a thing as a saturated area? There is such a thing as a saturated area. So and it's a great question, Ariane. There's two fears we face as investors when we first start out in real estate. And there's a ton of fears with investing, right? I could lose my money. I can get ripped off. I've had people who bought into Bitcoin when it was first coming out and literally their wallets didn't exist. So hopefully that's been improved over the last decade, and these were smart people. So the two main fears the landlord faces. The first one, what if a tenant trashes my property? Right? My brother alleviated this for me by saying, just plan for it. They're gonna. So you have reserves. You screen your tenants as good as you can. A lot of it's based on credit score because they don't want to destroy that. Right? So you alleviate the fear by having reserves, having your systems in place, having handyman and contractors lined up, screening tenants well. So, okay, the what if a tenant trashes my property kind of goes away when I learn the binder strategy and I have happy tenants don't trash your property and happy tenants don't leave, right? So I haven't really had that problem. So the next fear is, what if I buy a place and nobody rents it? Like that's the first fear that a landlord really struggles with is what if I've got this mortgage and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months go by and there's no tenant. Josh and Mary just went through this. And I'm actually kind of glad that Josh and Mary waited for the right tenant. They could have lowered their criteria, took bigger risks and got the tenant in a month or two sooner and had a little more income. But I think waiting for the right tenant is a brilliant move. So good job. It's not the right fear. Right? The first fear is, what if the property's empty and I have to pay the mortgage, right? So it's a saturated market. Nobody wants to rent it. The right fear is, how much might I have to lower the rent to get a tenant? Because in a saturated market, you will have rental units available. The ones that are priced right rent quickly. The ones that are advertised rent better as well. So when you're running your numbers and you see properties are renting and the area average is 18 or 19, but properties sit for a while, well, what does it look at 15? What happens to your cash on cash return if you're 10, 15, or 20% below the area average rents? Because that's what happens in a saturated market. Prices get pushed down. If it is too saturated and the price is pushed down so far, your cash on cash return goes away. Well, now it's not a good deal, right? That's why we do a rent study. We can't go to Rentometer and say, what are the rents in an area? Because it's based on 12 months of historical data. It can be based on 3 with the pro account, but I've seen it off as much as 30%, sometimes high, sometimes low. It's a snapshot. Then you don't want to go to Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, Zillow, Redfin, apartments.com and go, here's what rents are looking like. Because what if that property sits for 2 weeks, then comes back lower? What if it gets posted, sits for 2 days, gets so much interest, they take it down and put it up $500 more, right? That snapshot picture doesn't tell you anything. So you want to do a rent study of a couple of weeks. What seems to rent, what goes away, what ones get a lower price, what seems to be the area average, and if I went 10 or 15% below that, what happens to my yield? That's how I look at it. And then a lot of times people will look at an area, but they're using the wrong platform. Right. Some areas of the country are heavy on apartments.com. Some are heavy on Zillow. Some are heavy on Craigslist, especially if you're around a college, right? Or a military base, there might be some other platform that they're using. So I like Hemlink because it puts you out on 30. One click, you put information in once, puts it out on 30 platforms. It's worked really well for me in this last couple of years. But are you looking at the right platform for your area? And a perfect example of this is the people who go, well, I want to buy real estate, but there's no small multifamily in my area. My first question is always, how are you looking? Because in some areas, they just don't show up on Redfin or Zillow or Realtor. And in some areas they do, and they're right on top of the MLS. And in some, my deals showed up 3 or 4 months after I closed, and they showed up as pending. And sometimes you look up a property, it's on Zillow, but it's not on Redfin. It's physically not even on there. Are you using the platform that's right for your area? Are you trying several of them to know for sure what the rents are? And there are markets where it doesn't make sense. Maybe your asset class doesn't make sense. I had to switch from single family to small multifamily. Zuber went 2.5 hours away. There are other areas where single family perform better than small multifamily. So real estate is local. Bill, got a person that pays late every month. Want to not renew the lease. Any tips, or should I get a lawyer from the start? Sure, they will have a hard time getting a new place. So they pay late every month. First, are they paying the late fees? Second, Bill, have you had the conversation with them of what's your pay structure like? Right, I've got a tenant, retired, gets her payment on like the third every month or something. So we made the rent due the fourth, late 5 days after that. I've got another tenant. I forget what it was, but for whatever reason, the lease started on the 15th, like middle of the month going through. Is there a day of the month that you can start your lease with that tenant that might avoid the rent being late? And for the not renew, that depends on your area. There are certain states where not renew is fine. There are some states where you can't not renew without a reason. So do you need to do a rehab? Do you need to move into the property? Is there a lease violation? Like, now, rent being late is not a lease violation. The tenant is allowed to pay the rent late. That's what the late fees are for. Are they paying the late fees every month? So if it's a lease violation you're looking at, I'd probably talk to an attorney. I'd start with a conversation with the tenant of you're late with the rent every month. Here's the late fees, and you have to pay them, period, going forward, or I'm going to start an eviction process. Or if they're paying the late fees, do you care? Right? Yeah. Hopefully in there was something you can work with, depending on the other details of your situation that I can't get from the comment. And the all-nighter hire follows up with, can you maybe move the date? They only paid on time 3 times, and the 3 times the brother paid the rent for her. Yeah, I have a tenant, they've never had the rent late, but their mom pays one for them every now and then every now and then they have an agency pay for them. They had 2 times there were CARES Act where they got 2 months paid for. I haven't not renewed, but I know that they're not, and they're not tenants I screened. They were in the property when I bought it. Long as it gets paid. And everything else too, that there's no other lease violations. The wealth building journey. Howdy. And then we go Josh. Hey, Jacob. I'm in Spokane as well. Nice. Brandon. Howdy. When you purchase are looking for 25% total cash flow, 15% reserve, 10% cash on cash return. No. Maybe. Let me make sure I process this right. When you purchase, you're looking for a 25% total cash flow, 15% plus 10% cash on cash, correct? I think you're saying the same thing. So I've generally shot for a 10% cash on cash return with the ability to set aside 15% of gross rents. So 15% of gross rents doesn't equate to 15% of, like, the 10% cash on cash return doesn't mean that I'm keeping 10%. Like, so yeah, so it's not the same, but math's fuzzy when you try to explain it with words. $2,000 coming in. 15% of gross rents would be $300, right? 150 per thousand. That's 15%. So $300 being set aside for that. A 10% cash on cash return isn't based on the $2,000 in rent. It's based on how much did it cost to acquire the property, right? A 10% cash on cash return can be $1, right? Depending if you got it like with a VA loan and paid the closing costs and whatever. I was generally doing it with 20 or 25% down in a high cost of living area. So 10% generally tended to be $400 or $500 a door. So significantly more than what I'm setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. The 10% cash on cash return is way more than the 15%. It's so hard to put this into words for the reserves. So I have a property, it's a duplex, mortgage is $1,300. Each unit's rented out for $2,000, right? So $4,000 coming in, $1,300 goes out for mortgage. What is it? 15% of 4,000 is $600 getting a set aside. So 13 and 6 is 1,900. I'm making 2,100. And 600 is being set aside for that 15%. You see how big the difference is? The 10% for cash on cash return is way more than the 15%. So it doesn't go together that way. So it's a good question, Brandon, for clarification, that the 15% is of gross rents. The 10% is a annual profit divided by cost to acquire. So we're trying to compare, it's not apples to oranges, it's apples to chickens. Right? It's totally different animals. Good question. Wish I had a better answer. I might actually take a screenshot of that and try to answer that in an actual video with a whiteboard, because we'll see how that goes. If you don't see that video soon, it's because I couldn't figure it out, because I'm not a math guy. Just did an interview with Bob, and he has 260 rental units, and the title of the video is Getting 260 Rental Units with 6th Grade Math. Because can you add, subtract, multiply, divide? That's what I can do. Brandon Potts, expenses are independent net of cash flow, so ROI is after all expenses. True. Jacob. Thanks, Dion. Much appreciated. Hey, Josh, Spokane seems like a great area for house hacking. Are you investing there? It does. And with Spokane, so that backwards cash flow is independently net of expenses. Beth Traverso, howdy. Good to see you. Looking forward to seeing you in Vegas. It's going to be a great event. Wolf catching up to speed. Good question. Thank you. Jared, fight for rent control. Anytime any government entity gets involved, they F it up. Look at the minimum wage. I don't eat fast food, but look at the price of a burger these days. Yeah. Fight the rent control. Yeah. Okay. So I should be a decent human. That's what you're saying. Julie, testify, save the people from themselves. Okay. Bill, no offense, but they will probably not listen to you about rent control. It makes the politician look good, buy votes to stick it to the landlords. I totally agree with that. And so there was a bill that came out 2014, well-intended bill. And what I made some enemies in Olympia on this one. The bill would funnel funds to people in the United States, I don't want to say illegally, but not through the normal channels, for training. Because I ran a CDL school, and it was going to put about $4 million into the school's pocket if we would train people from other countries. But it took the funding from the veterans. It literally went into the pool of money that veterans can use for training, funneled it to foreigners training for CDL, the non-domiciled CDL bill. There you go. My memory kicked in finally. 2 years. Now I'm a CDL school. I worked with the Department of Licensing. They were pushing for it because it meant a bunch of revenue for them, because people who don't speak English as a first language have to take the test many, many, many times to get through. And it's $250 a pop. So the DOL was standing to make a ton of money. I went and fought this thing over and over and over. So for 2 years, stopped it. 3rd year, finally made it through. I think that's how rent control would go. Let's say I went and actually had a good argument, enough support, people to realize, okay, we're going to delay it this year. It was delayed from last year, never made it out of committee because of a video I made. Well, not because. It did make it out of committee for a lot of reasons, but I contributed to that by making a video and sending that video to the legislators that were on that committee, basically saying, here's how it makes me rich. Here's how it makes tenants homeless. And I didn't say I was support or against. I just said, hey, have you really thought this through? I think even if I went and was effective, I would just be delaying it a year or two before it does make it through. And so, yes, in Washington State, we took a bunch of funding, it was 3 years later, from veterans and spent it on people from another country, which, hey, they needed the money too. But so did the veterans. And the guy at the DOL who wanted me dead finally retired. All Night Hider, yes, free market capitalism, rent control is in clear opposition of this. That is true. I agree. Josh, house hacking is a great method. I have a couple single family rentals in Spokane. There you go. Frank, when is your next vacation? I almost became a douchebag there for a second. I was going to say every day, but that's not true. So retired in 2022. When is my next trip? I was going to spend the winter in Thailand. I was supposed to be in Thailand right now, but thank you, City of Port Orchard, for being mean and making everything delayed and taking longer on the rehab on my property here. So I'm staying here until this rehab's done. I'm going to Vegas for a week. I'll be there for the one rental at a time event, February 13th to the 19th, and I'll be there. The event is on the 17th and 18th. We're having a couple of midnight Denny's meetups. As soon as the rehab downstairs is done and it is rented out, I will be spending, I want to say 2 months, but it's somewhere between 2 and 10 months in Thailand. Scuba diving, hanging out on the island, probably remote managing a couple of projects at my units. I've got one where I'm trying a 2-bedroom into 3-bedroom. I've got a roof that needs done. I've got a garage door that needs done. Some future problems that aren't pressing that I'll be doing just through emails and texts while I'm there. I will also be doing YouTube videos the entire time I'm in Thailand. So Thailand's technically the next vacation. Vegas is kind of a vacation, but it's only a week. But since I retired in 2022, every day is, no kidding, I play a lot of VR games. Got the Quest 3. I like it. The graphics are much better than the Quest 2. I play a lot of online games. I work out a lot. I just goof off so much. So many people say, "Oh, you should retire. You can do your passion projects." And I'm like, I don't want to do nothing. Nothing is amazing. And there's never enough time to do all of the nothing that you want to. Calvin and Hobbes said that. Thank you for the question, Frank. That's the next trip. And my goal is to get everybody else to the same position where I think not all of you are going to be as lazy as I am. I think a lot of you are going to work on your passion projects. And I think the world is a better place when people do the jobs that they want to instead of the jobs that they have to. Dividend Dave. Wealth. To quote Joey Tribbiani of Friends regarding women or cooking, I want girls on bread. Yeah, put your hands together. That would have been the Tribbiani quote. Angel R. My poor kids. There was a period of time when I was super frugal and we didn't have any streaming services or cable or anything, but we did have the Friends discs. So my kids can quote all of that. Probably hate them. Probably can't stand them. Angel R, the math gives a good return, but I would have to rehab the property. I want to buy my turnkey. I've done 2 rehabs and kind of hate it. I'm with you. I've done 1, and it was my first one after 12 years of investing, and now I'm never doing this again. A couple of projects, hire a roofer to go in. If you're in Pierce or Thurston County, Washington, I have a great roofing company that I would recommend. But I don't want. So the electric permit process, fairly quick. The electric inspection process, not so much. The plumbing permit process, pretty quick. Inspection, pretty quick. So plumbing can be done, electric can be done, but waiting on inspection. And you can't do the drywall because you have to be able to inspect what they worked on. So now the drywall could be doing their stuff, but can't. And then the siding permit is so stupid. 81-year-old lady, couple doors down from us, waiting years for permit approval. So here's how I handled my permit approval in a city that was fighting me on it and wanting me to wait years to replace siding. They require a permit if you have over 1,000 square feet of siding done. So I'm in an up-down duplex. I did the downstairs siding, which was a little less than 1,000 square feet, didn't need a permit. Now that that is done, I'm starting a completely new job to do the upstairs siding, which is a little less than 1,000 square feet and doesn't need a permit. And the city said, okay. I didn't ask her, and I'm going to use an unprofessional term, but do you understand how retarded that is? So yeah, Angel, I'm with you. No more rehabs. No. Anna K, howdy. Good to see you here. Thank you. Thank you very much. A bunch of people say hi to Anna, which is cool. I'm not a hider. I'll CGI something for you, Dave. There you go. Angel, do you have any units where you pay some of the utilities, or this a deal breaker? You pay for their heat in Pennsylvania. I wouldn't want to pay for heat or electric. I do have some properties where the municipalities require the owner pay for sewer and water. It's one of the reasons I do prefer septic. One, there's a bunch, but you have to know your local laws. In some areas, you're not allowed to charge a penny more than the actual cost of the utilities. So if they are in your name and you're going to charge the tenants, bake it into the rent. The rent's higher, utilities are included. I wouldn't want to do that because tenants will have the windows open, the heat on if it's in your name. But with water and septic, in my area, as long as you're not overcharging, no one cares. So what I do is my bill tends to be 47, 50 bucks a unit. So I charge 55 or 60, depending on the unit. And then in the summer, there's a couple spiky months where the water is like $80 or $90. And that takes up the little bit extra for the other months to balance out the year. So it's pretty much about the same. I'm okay with that. I only have one tenant who does stupid things. And so I'm probably not going to renew. I'm going to be in the bill situation where you're costing me money. I don't want to renew. We'll see how that goes. In the it so work. California works. What's the Washington to come up with something. Watch social, nope, it's not there. I would have the expense of putting in meters if I had to. I would look at properties, get quotes on how much it's going to be to do that. I know that Lumberjack had several places where the utilities were in his name, especially with Section 8, and then he changed it to where it goes into the tenant's name. And it, of course, caused problems because tenants had no idea how much they were costing him. I prefer not to, but I'll do water and sewer and then know what will work. And in some areas, what I would do is just do a month in the rear, have it in the lease. Part of your deposit will pay for your last months of utilities, but every month I'm going to email you a copy of the bill. You're going to pay me the amount on your bill. It's baked into the lease. Find out if that's okay in your area. That's how I would handle that. Definitely not my preference. Not a deal breaker, right? I mean, not everything is a deal breaker, but a lot of things are wants, right? I say things like, I want several economic drivers, like a base, a port, a college, a hospital, Boeing, Amazon, large population, right? But I invested in a town called McKenna, Washington, that has a population under 500, right? So I want a large population, but is everything else about that deal good enough? It's one of my better performing properties. I say that often. I'm trying to think if I have a bad performing property. I have a frustrating property, but I don't know if I have a bad performing property. And okay, my chest is getting thicker from push-ups. Your body goes to whatever level it gets shocked to. And I think there are some people who just never work out, and I don't understand it. And I won't tell you, I'm not a cardio guy. I'm not a runner. I have an injury that doesn't make running very fun. And then I don't know. But yeah. Don't know too many people who don't feel good after working out. Most people hurt after the first working out for a first month or two, but it starts to make you feel better. Jesse Scott, please take over NAR as president. I don't know. I don't know if I'd want the pay cut. JNYC, one of the extracurricular events in Vegas at the Vegas event. Wednesday and Thursday at midnight at the closest Denny's to the Blind Center. We'll put out the address, probably do a live when we get there on where everybody's meeting. David Dave, I spilled spot remover on my dog. Now he's gone, of course. Angel Argo, month to month in case the bill passes. The problem with month to month on that is they say in a 12-month period. Right? So you can only have a 5% increase in a 12-month period. And as far if you ever go through an eviction or a non-renewal, it's just as hard with the month to month as it is with a year-long lease. And the problem with month to month, Angel, this is right. So I'm not trying to disagree. I'm saying logically why I don't like month to month. The first 2 years of investing in real estate are the hardest. They're the most challenging. Lenders don't want to lend to you. You're not a proven safe investor yet. But once you have rental income on 2 years, they'll start to look at rental income of the place you're looking at in your tax returns. If it's your underwriter also has the ability to say, we want the majority, which means 51%. So it's not a lot. If you have 2, it means both. If you have 10, it means at least 6 of your leases to have at least 3 months remaining. Month to month never shows more than 1 month remaining. So 3 months remaining or more on a lease. And that was confusing the first time a lender told me that. They were like, yeah, well, I said, you're going to let me make a 30-year commitment to hundreds of thousands in a mortgage because I have a tenant that's made at least a 3-month commitment to a couple thousand in rent. And they said, yeah, because we're going to sell your mortgage before those 3 months are up. We're not going to own it. It's not our problem. It's like, okay. So that's the main reason why I don't do that. Jared, every time you hit the like button, an angel gets its wings. I would appreciate that. I'm going to give it another couple minutes here to see if there are any questions that hit the chat. If not, I'll be wrapping it up for tonight. And remember, there is a 6 o'clock members only live stream tonight for people who want to look at deals. So if you have a deal you want us to look at, you're welcome to come. That's my preference. I actually don't want to look at my deals. I will look at the deals that my agents have been sending me, but it's weird. I'm trying not to add rentals in 2024. Don't compare. I usually say year 10 to year 1, but I mean, year 12 or 13 to year 1. If you're in growth phase, you should be hunting for deals. I'm in stabilization, learn how to spend, let the reserves pile up. I think in 2025, I'm going to use my VA loan. buy a fourplex, maybe. We'll see. The right amount of cash flow from the least amount of units. The closest Denny's is on Lake Mead and Civic Center. We'll have to look and see where it is. There is a Denny's on the Strip. We'll see. We'll see which one's closer. I hope everybody has a week full of amazing. And I hope that the intro to this video, it was literally actually only 10 minutes this time, which is very rare. The intro usually goes 15, 20 minutes. But the difference between saving, reserves, emergency fund, and do we continue to save after our reserves are full? Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.